from first responders to technology innovators. Different roles, different stories, but one goal: to meet the need for crisis care and overcome the obstacles together. So join in. The Crisis Jam is starting now.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Megan Haupt. I'm Chief of Staff of the National Association of State Mental Health Program Directors. I'm really excited that you're joining Season 6, Episode 251. The main feature is going to be on psychosis, criminalization, and homelessness, featured by Dr. Katherine Warburton, who is Chief Medical Officer for the health system for hospitals in California. So really thrilled that she is here. Great. And if you want information about the Crisis Jam, past episodes, newsletter, etc., go to crisisjam.com. And of course, it's Shaping the Future of Crisis Together. You can register there. You can watch the live streams. Again, the newsletter. You can see past episodes, see the pre-show video, all kinds of information. And if you really want to see and go way back to some past episodes, you can go to 5 Lanes, One Road to Recovery, which is on YouTube. Great. And let's go to breaking crisis news. And we are going to go to Dr. Margie Balfour, who's going to highlight the pit. Go ahead, Dr. Balfour.
Hi. So, yeah, the pit has been in the news it's just breaking all of these awards records. And, I'm a physician, I'm a psychiatrist, and I didn't actually watch it for a while because I was like, do I really want to watch work? And people keep asking, how realistic is it? And I actually know a lot of physicians who don't watch it because they found it triggering, after COVID. So I'm going to be in and out this crisis jam session and kind of doing is this real or made for TV?
Great. Thank you, Dr. Balfour. And now we're going to go to our trivia hot seat. Okay, and we've got Dr. Richard McKeon and Dr. John Draper, who are a fantastic duo. They've done this individually before, but not together. So this is going to be phenomenal, I think. No pressure, but I think it will be. And just to note that, if you're on the hot seat, you can get some Crisis Jam swag. And you can go to our shop, crisisjam.shop. So you can get t-shirts and stuff like that. So let's go. Richard and John, are you there? Richard McKeon? John Draper? You guys there?
I'm here.
Okay, great, Dr. McKeon. And is John Draper on? Richard, this might be just you, man. All right, so we might need to do that, and we'll get the help of the audience as well. If John Draper is on, let me know if I'm missing that. Okay, so Dr. McKeon, let's go to the first hot seat. All right, so which of the following behavioral health scenarios appeared in the pilot episode of The Pit starring Noah Wiley, Season 1, Episode 1? Now, I am going to say this is the sneaky edition of this question. So go ahead. Let's see. A, did it have to do with BAC being 420? B, suicidal crisis for attending physician? Or C, PTSD and violent ideation? Or D, naked elopement due to acute agitation? So Richard, again, this is a sneaky question edition. What do you think? And also, audience, put in what you think And the
Well,
poll is there.
I am at a disadvantage because I did not see the opening episode of The Pit. So I'm going to have to try to draw on my knowledge of Hollywood and television screenwriters' approach to mental health and substance use issues. But I would love to see what the poll is showing.
All right, let's take a look at the poll. Look at that. Okay. So we got 2% at the BAC being 420. That would kill most of us. Suicidal crisis of a physician, 35%. PTSD, violent ideation, 40%. Naked elopement due to acute agitation, 23%. Very interesting. It kind of equally broken down. What are your thoughts?
Well, here are my thoughts.
Okay.
And this is going to be based on the fact that I think more attention needs to be given to suicidal crises among first-line workers, including, of course, the physicians that we depend on all of the time. And I think that, the PTSD violent ideation is a little bit of a stereotype, particularly around our veterans. I would hope it would not be that. But I suppose it could be one of the other two. But I am going to go with B. Suicidal crisis for an attending physician.
All right. All right. Let's take a look.
So Megan, John Draper has joined.
Oh, great. John, how long have you been on?
I just got on. As you can see, I'm just snowed under here.
Oh, you poor thing. All
yeah,
right.
I made it.
Okay, John, I'm going to say this real quick. Okay. This is a sneaky question edition. Here's the question. Which of the following behavioral health scenarios appeared in the pilot episode of The Pit starring Noah Wiley? Do you know the show?
I do.
Okay. Then that will help. So BAC 420 or suicidal crisis for attending physician, PTSD violent ideation, or naked elopement acute agitation. Note, it is a sneaky question edition.
Richard, I'm thinking it's C, but I'm not sure if it was in the pilot episode.
All right. So the audience was pretty evenly split among all four, except BAC got a very low percentage. The rest were evenly split. All right. So should we take a look at this? You guys ready?
Yep, we're ready.
It's all four. Now, I want to know.
That is sneaky.
It's sneaky. Now, one of the issues here is The Pit shows 1 hour of the emergency room through a 24-hour period. So it starts in the morning, like the episodes, and then the next hour is the next episode. And so within 1 hour, these four things happened. Okay.
And then, y'all wanted me to weigh in on, is this realistic or not? And yes, I think the highest BAL I saw was 510. And that would kill any of us, but, people are up and walking and talking. Naked elopement, seen that, usually involves some sort of stimulant. I do like, that they highlighted and Richard, as you mentioned, physicians have a higher, rate of suicide than the general population. Top three are surgeons, anesthesia, and psychiatry. And yes, and then they, had a patient where they were worried about violent ideation. So I would say The Pit is pretty accurate. Maybe it's tied for most accurate with Scrubs. That is also a very accurate doctor show.
All right. Great. Thank you so much to you guys. So don't go anywhere. We have more. But let's do a sound check with the audience. Now, we did this in the backstage pass, but what's the longest you've ever waited in a hospital emergency department for any reason?
Time has come.
So
For
just
this.
go ahead and put that in the sound check. We're now going to go to over under. All right, so over under. And so Richard and John, this will be you guys. We have 2 over unders today, so hang in there. The first is in the final scene of the Pit pilot, Dr. Robbie reacts to the crowded ED waiting room. He's triggered by what had happened during COVID. And so this is the waiting room empty. How many patients are in this room in the final shot? Now, this, you'll see that staff are there, but we did an AI piece where we took out all of the patients, and there were certain clues along the way on this throughout this episode. So if you saw those, you might get a hunch. Any ideas? In the final scene of the Pit pilot, Dr. Robbie reacts to the crowded ED waiting room, 8 a.m. How many patients are in this room in the final shot? Who wants to do the number?
Well, you're saying it's at 8 a.m.?
Yep.
Yeah. I remember a very, very crowded room. But again, I don't know if that was an 8 a.m. or, but I recall it very, very crowded. I just don't know. Can't imagine what the number is. You have to count the seats here. Plus, I think it was huge number of folks.
Okay. You want to just give a number?
There it
Look
is.
at that. How many people do you think that might be?
Oh my God. Look at the wall time for the people in there.
I know.
Oh my God.
Looks like it's got to be at least 20, 25.
25.
Oh,
Okay. Over, under?
Over for sure.
Over. All right. So we counted and it looks like it's like between 40 and 45. 8 a.m. in an ED. That's pretty quite amazing. So let's go to the second over under. All right. Let's take a look. So made for TV or real world in Parkland in Dallas. There are certainly, a lot of backup. So the key is what percentage of hospital EDs in the US might routinely see a waiting room so backed up? Now, we're going to get to the math on how we came up with this, but somebody, what do you think?
What do you think, John? It looks, it's routinely, so frequently that backed up. That obviously looks like emergency department boarding. How often is that an issue for U.S. emergency departments? What do you think, John?
Oh my gosh, routinely. I would probably, and again, we could phone a friend because Margie is right here. We can knock on her cell.
Throw out the number. It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
Give it a try.
Yeah, Margie, what do you think?
Well,
Go ahead, Margie.
Kind of did, some back of the napkin math because I kind of struggled. David asked me to, how would you calculate that? And I kind of struggled too. So this is really evidence-based, research rigorous back of the napkin math. But, so we're talking about the waiting room being backed up. So that's congestion. So there's 40 people in that waiting room, but that doesn't mean that there's 40 people coming, an hour. That's just how many are backed up. So it's congestion. So you want to, you're looking at your capacity, you're looking at your throughput, you're looking at, people, the ED itself being backed up. So there's 5,000 hospitals in the US, which I actually thought there were more. And then they're classified, CMS classifies them, by size. And so there's about 25% that are like this large academic safety net urban hospitals. And, then you're talking about like during peak periods. So I added like another 10% because there's other reasons EDs can be backed up too. They don't necessarily have to be the urban ones. They can be ones where there's no other hospital around. So just back of the napkin came up with 35%, which is probably an underestimate, especially given some of the comments in the chat about everyone
Wow.
having experiences and waiting so long. So in this, why are we talking about all of this? And we're doing so much work in our world over here in creating all of these crisis levels of care and facilities and all these alternatives to keep people out of the ED if they don't need to be there. And but in the meantime, EDs continue to chug along and do this work. And that first hour of the pit shows the kind of things that are happening. That kid with the violent ideation, you notice that they were kind of talking to him kind of out in the middle of the ED, and they're wheeling traumas and stuff behind them. And I mean, when I worked in Parkland, which gets like 2 patients a minute,
Yeah.
that's what it was like. I mean, we had a team we had like a little empath unit. We had a team that would go out into the ED, and I remember once hearing, you hear someone scream, and my social worker was like, "I think that's our ringtone," and that's just kind of how chaotic it is. So,
No, thank you, Dr. Balfour. And I'm so glad you're going to be on the roundtable because I think there's so much to say on this as well. And so let's go to Dr. Katherine Warburton to talk about psychosis, criminalization, and homelessness. And Dr. Warburton, thank you so much for being here. You're the medical director at California Department of State Hospitals. So thank you for being here. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm going to talk about some very specific group of human beings, and these are individuals that I serve and have served for the last 20 plus years, and that is individuals who live with psychotic symptoms, who experience criminalization and homelessness. So I'm sure everybody on this call knows the hallmarks of schizophrenia spectrum disorders. And what we're finding here in California and have researched is the impact of the positive symptoms of schizophrenia, specifically hallucinations and delusions, driving, both unsheltered conditions as well as criminal legal contact. So oftentimes what we see are hallucinations where people perceive things that are not there. And in our population, it's usually voices. And in our population, it's usually voices forcing people to do things that sometimes cross into situations where police get involved. And then delusions, as we know, that is misperceiving reality through false beliefs. And in our population, it's often paranoia, specifically persecutory delusions that cause people to want to move outside because they become concerned and paranoid about the people living close to them. And also that persecutory perspective tends to drive some criminal legal involvement. Next slide, please. Another important facet is in our population, many of our patients that we treat. In fact, I worked on a unit of 36 patients who'd been found not guilty by reason of insanity, and all of them at the time of their instant offense were not aware that they were ill. But there are multiple studies showing that for individuals living with schizophrenia spectrum disorder, a lack of awareness is very common. Next slide, please. So I'm going to present an actual de-identified case vignette of a patient who was admitted to our system as incompetent to stand trial. Next slide, please. And this scenario, again, is about 50% of the patients that we serve as incompetent to stand trial have some variation on this theme. So this was a 37-year-old transient male. The police were called when he refused to leave a fast food restaurant. He was asked to step outside and he complied. He was told he was not welcome at the restaurant, and the officers went to search him and put their hands on him. When that happened, he became very upset and tried to get out of the grasp of officers. He then tried to call the police on an imaginary phone. He was talking to himself about the devil. He was missing one of his eyes, and he informed police that he took out his eye because the devil told him to. When they tried to handcuff him, he struggled, was tasered multiple times. So this is an individual who is experiencing persecutory delusions. He does not realize that the police are the police, as evidenced by the fact that he took out an imaginary phone to call the police. He has severe persecutory delusions about the devil, and he believes that the police are involved or are the devil, and that's why he struggled. And instead of receiving care, this individual was charged with felony battery with injury on a police officer and resisting an executive officer. So this is a very typical scenario that we see with patients who've been found incompetent to stand trial. The outcomes for people living with schizophrenia spectrum disorders are horrible. While they make up only 1% of the overall population, they make up 20 to 30% of the homeless population, 15% of state prison populations, 24% of jail populations. They die 20 years earlier than the rest of us, and schizophrenia is one of the top leading causes of disability worldwide. I don't have time to go into this slide, but I have some references here. And the point of this slide is it's demonstrating that since the beginning of the United States, we have a cyclical pattern of mental health policy failure that results in extreme inhumane conditions for people living with psychosis. And this is just talking about the asylum movement. Asylums were considered good things for a long time. Individuals were neglected and those asylums became overcrowded. And now, as we enter into the middle of this century, we are facing yet another crisis in our jails, prisons, forensic hospitals, and on our streets. Next slide, please. Deinstitutionalization was actually kicked off here in California with the LPS Act in 1967 that was implemented in 1969. There were a lot of reasons for deinstitutionalization, including hope that antipsychotic medications could allow people to have meaningful lives in the community. The institutions that were overcrowded were going to be extremely costly to rehabilitate. There was widespread outrage at the unchecked civil commitment of individuals living with all sorts of conditions, including psychotic illnesses. And as you all know, that was when the advent of federal reimbursement happened. So all of these different social factors led to the deinstitutionalization movement. Next slide, please. However, I have a whole talk on this. I'm not going to be able to give it in the 15 minutes I have, but we have demonstrated that a lot of the current IST crisis is being driven by the deinstitutionalization and abandonment, basically, of people who live with psychotic symptoms. And this is just a study showing that IST commitments increased post-deinstitutionalization by an average of 20%. And that the increase in IST admissions was very positively correlated to the rate of deinstitutionalization. This was a paper from the 80s that warned if we weren't careful, the IST commitment was going to mirror the civil commitment issues from 100 years earlier. This is just a slide showing the Penrose effect, or as people in mental hospitals and the population started to drop, that was, you see the increasing numbers in prison populations. And this is called the Penrose effect or Penrose law. Next slide, please. This is a study showing that reductions to local psychiatric bed capacity, and these are community, short-term community psychiatric beds, were correlated significantly with an average increase in jail inmates in that catchment area. Next slide, please. Interesting conversation listening to you all this morning. This is a study showing that looking at police discretion, indicating that when confronted with the choice between arresting a person with a mental illness or bringing that person to an emergency room. The most important factor was whether the officer thought that person would be admitted to a hospital bed. So this is what we're seeing in California, like the gentleman in my vignette, when an individual is clearly experiencing hallucinations and delusions, and instead ends up getting booked into jail on a felony charge. Next slide, please. This is a study showing that the two factors most positively associated with high frequency incarceration include schizophrenia, spectrum disorders, and homelessness. So again, the population that I serve. Next slide, please. It's extremely important, especially right now, with the executive order that came out in July, and a lot of discussion around involuntary civil commitments, to recognize that the Penrose effect does not give us a binary choice between locking people up in mental hospitals and locking them up in prison. And this is a slide demonstrating that the Penrose effect is actually mediated by untreated symptoms of mental illness being relabeled as criminal behavior, much like the gentleman in my vignette. And I am here to beg all of us to start thinking about policy solutions that result in people having those symptoms of mental illness treated so they don't have to be involved in the criminal legal system. This was a great study that came out in 2017. It was the first real longitudinal data that I saw, just demonstrating this criminalization and the increasing forensic populations in state hospitals being largely driven by the IST crisis. We've studied thousands and thousands of incompetent to stand trial patients in California. We've interviewed them, we've given them structured assessments, and the bottom line from all of our research in California is that 2/3 of individuals being admitted to California state hospitals on a felony IST commitment, 2/3 were experiencing some form of homelessness when they entered the system, and almost half were living in completely unsheltered conditions. We tracked a cohort of our patients through Medi-Cal and found that half had not received any Medi-Cal reimbursable mental health services in the 6 months prior to their arrest. And the vignette about the emergency room earlier, those that did receive Medicaid reimbursable mental health services were largely seen in emergency room settings. We have this cycle of criminalization in California where we restore people to competency, we send them back to jail. That's all we can really do once we restore them, and we restore 88% of the patients we serve with antipsychotic medications. A significant percentage of those individuals get their charges dropped or get time served, and 75% go back out to the community and to unsheltered, untreated conditions, and 70% are rearrested within 3 years. So this cycle of criminalization, it touches emergency departments, jails, state hospitals, and homeless services. We did a survey in 2017 where we asked respondents, state level administrators, what they thought was driving the IST crisis in their state. And these were the answers: inadequate general mental health services in the community, inadequate crisis services, an inadequate number of community psychiatric beds, and inadequate ACT in their community. Next slide, please. This is just a graphic of the cycle of criminalization. This is, in our opinion, the new institution of this century, and I won't go further into that in the interest of time. Next slide, please. And this is a slide that we originally started using. You can populate all the puzzle pieces, just kind of demonstrating the new forensic patient. And we're not just treating categorical psychiatric illness anymore. We're treating the impacts of homelessness, significant criminal legal involvement, the cognitive deficits from long durations of untreated psychosis, violent behavior, severe, very severe medical comorbidities, trauma, and other issues. And this is a very complex set of behavioral health needs and our systems need to gear up to provide interventions for all of the pieces of this puzzle if we are going to interrupt the Penrose effect and effectively treat people who are living in psychosis in our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Warburton. So much information. We so appreciate your work. And let's go to the roundtable. We have Dr. Margie Balfour, as well as Sabrina Taylor, who's Detective and CIT Coordinator for Phoenix Police Department. Let's go to Detective Sabrina Taylor first. Are you on?
I'm here. For some reason,
wonderful.
My link, it's coming up as Michelle. So apparently I'm Michelle today.
Okay, everybody, that's Sabrina, not Michelle. All right. So if you could give us your impressions, and in particular, I'm kind of curious about your perspective on what is the role of the crisis system and building out community services related to intervening in this cycle.
That's a difficult question.
Okay. But please give me your impressions even beyond that question. Like, what are your thoughts?
Sure. So I feel like there's, police are always going to be involved in some way because, things can devolve and become, scary. But I think there's a role for prevention, and opportunities to have like pre-crisis intervention and post-crisis intervention that could cut us out of things. And so I generally try, at least here in the greater Phoenix area, to look for those opportunities where we can divert people into the crisis system without touching the criminal justice system, or ensuring that they don't stay there long. And so, I think we go back to the sequential intercept model and looking at all the ways that if people get tangled up in the system, we can get them out fast.
No, thank you so much. And Dr. Balfour, what is your impression? What's your perspective?
Yeah, this really illustrates, that our services don't happen in a vacuum. And oftentimes, I'll get asked as someone who's working in a crisis system that's, considered, pretty good, more robust than most, what are the gaps? And my kind of standard answer is that number one is housing, number two is housing, number three might be transportation, but probably is housing. And, we can do a lot in short-term stabilization, but then there's a next step. And, we try to do all of this with behavioral health services, but if you just don't have your basic needs met and in a way that this population can be successful, then it's just you're spinning your wheels on this revolving door. And there's been a lot, with the executive order or about, getting people off the streets and into treatment. Well, that treatment and those supports have to be there. We had a pendulum that maybe swung, in the, letting people be on the streets and not wanting to be overly coercive, to now there's some swinging in the other direction. And these aren't black and white. They're, involuntary commitment is one tool of many if it's used strategically and, matched to the population that it may be helpful for, versus like a broad hammer to solve what is a social problem. And these things are complicated, and I'm part of the group that wrote the roadmap to the ideal crisis system. And our current project that we're working on is we're trying to tackle this issue and kind of get into some guidance and some, especially around some of the nuance in this, and in a way that is recovery oriented. And a couple of our members wrote an op-ed recently, so I'm putting the link to that in the chat. But I'm glad that we're discussing these complicated issues as we work on our crisis services.
Yeah, no, thank you, Dr. Balfour. And Sabrina, do you have any thoughts on what Dr. Balfour is, or any additions to what Dr. Balfour is saying?
Sure. I think we get asked this a lot in Arizona, like what's next? What else can we do? What is more? And so I've talked to a lot of people in a lot of different like data collection settings, like system users, and asking them like what are the gaps that you see? What is working well? What isn't working well? And oddly enough, a lot of them say that the police involvement in their crisis was the smoothest, easiest, most wonderful part of this. And that's usually coming from caregivers, not the people who are in crisis. But that there's still system hiccups. Housing is one. Caregivers are having to house their loved ones somehow. And community pressure because behaviors are causing disruption in the community is another thing that weighs on caregivers and police. And then just interoperability, not getting meds that were prescribed by a PCP, eligibility and insurance. These are the things that people are still saying that they're running into problems with. And so, we're in a system where we actually have options, we still have some hiccups.
Mm-hmm. And Dr. Warburton, just wondering, what are the things you most want people to take away from your presentation? Like the top 3 things.
Well, I think, I heard the word complicated, I heard the word nuanced, and I think it is extremely important for us to start having nuanced conversations about how to treat individuals in a very complicated situation. I mean, I'm talking about individuals with the most complex behavioral health needs, but we are generating more and more of these individuals with complex behavioral health needs the longer we allow them to live outside without treatment for what we know to be a very treatable condition. But we tend to, I think, in policy spaces, dig into polarized, ideologically based positions that don't necessarily allow us to have the kind of nuanced discussion that's going to be imperative if we're going to craft policies for a very complex group of individuals. So I would say that's one takeaway. Another takeaway that I hope people get from this conversation, we do spend a lot of time talking about intercept 0, intercept 1, intercept 2. I'm talking to a bunch of crisis people, and that's very valuable. But the second thing I would like to have people take away from this is that there are many of our community members who are cycling through intercepts 3, 4, and 5. And we need to acknowledge that difficult reality and start taking actions to address that group of human beings as well in our conversations about the SIM. And I think the third takeaway is we're doing $15 billion in mental health system investment here in California. And one of the things that I've really found is that there is not an appropriate model of treatment that's going to be able to tackle all of the puzzle pieces of complexity that I showed in my slide. And we need to start thinking about a fundable, sustainable model of care for the individuals who've been abandoned by society, and figure out a way to integrate primary care, robust mental health services with an emphasis on psychopharmacology, trauma services, substance use disorder services, including contingency management. That has to be assertive community treatment. That has to be a integrated model where individuals can get all of those services in one place, preferably with cognitive rehabilitation services. And so, again, as policymakers discuss this, how do we fund that integrated model to make it sustainable, to help our individuals who are currently in my hospitals, on our streets, and in the jails and prisons?
No, thank you, Dr. Warburton. And I know I feel like we could talk about this like for hours. And I think it is so important. So I encourage Sabrina and Margie to please put even more ideas and comments in the chat. I would love to hear what other people think, and including perhaps even the role of AOT. I know there's going to be a future piece on that in a crisis jam as well. So thank you to all of you for your perspective, and it's a nice launching point. And let's go to the briefing room with Dr. Richard McKeon from SAMHSA. Dr. McKeon, please go ahead. Dr. McKeon, are you on? Okay. Maybe got called away. Let's go to NASHBID. Dr. Brian Hepburn, CEO of NASHBID.
Thank you, Megan. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
So thank you for the opportunity. And we really want to thank Dr. Warburton for her presentation, and Margie and Sabrina for their responses. And as you mentioned, and as they mentioned, this is a very difficult area. It does remind me of the work that we've done at NASHBID over the last 7 or 8 years on Beyond Beds. And that's highlighted by some of the things that have been mentioned by our speakers, looking at the role of law enforcement. And I think that the fact that often the decision as to whether a law enforcement is going to arrest an individual or take the individual to the emergency room has to do with whether they feel the individual is going to get mental health services. We know the default across the country is really to arrest. And I think that Dr. Warburton mentioned a number of things that we need to address, but also I think we need to address the issues of how do we keep people in a good community, a group of community mental health services? How do we help them to get crisis services? How do we keep them away from law enforcement? How do we keep them in the health system instead of the messy arrest competency system, which ties people up for months and resources for a long period of time? So looking at, we did so many papers. I think Deb Pinel's and her editing, I think she probably did over 70 papers on these issues, difficult issues, especially if you're in a situation like California where you have all these individuals stuck. And how do you stop that cycle of arrest, competency issues, back into the streets, homelessness? How do you stop that cycle? And Dr. Warburton mentioned the survey. What do professionals think would be helpful? Well, more mental health services, absolutely. Availability of crisis services, absolutely. The psych beds, in a way, it's, I think the debate on the number of psych beds you need is a little bit difficult, because back in when I started, individuals were staying in psych beds for years in state hospitals, and in acute general hospital psych units, they were staying for months. Nowadays, the number of inpatient episodes is higher than ever before. So I'm not sure it's just a matter of bed availability. I think the whole system needs to improve. We need to do a better job. 988 and crisis services, I think, is the direction that's very important to go towards. Also, as Margie said, housing, and I will change her third one, which she had transportation and maybe housing. I would say housing. We really need to do a better job of keeping people out of the criminal justice system, and we need to do a better job of giving people permanent housing. So I wasn't going to talk about that. I was going to talk about metabolic psychiatry. So please, just to help balance me off, look up metabolic psychiatry, make yourself comfortable with the concept of metabolic psychiatry, and I'll talk about that next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hepburn, and for your leadership in this area. I think it's just so important. And I also want to just add that peer support is just so key to helping build trust, when these issues are just so difficult. So peer support along the system as well. And so Dr. McKeon, please go ahead.
Thank you, Megan. As I've mentioned the last 2 weeks on the Jam, that the SAMHSA cooperative agreement for the 988 Lifeline Network Administrator is currently online. So we would encourage folks to take a look at that. It's obviously of critical importance to our whole effort to transform crisis services in America. That the network administrator is obviously key around that. And it is a $231 million annually. Obviously, year to year always depends on congressional appropriations, but it's a 5-year grant. So if you do the arithmetic, it's over a $1 billion funding opportunity. So I think it really reflects a tremendous commitment to 988 and to crisis system transformation. The other 3 grant opportunities from the 988 office that are all listed in SAMHSA's grant forecast. None of those are out yet, but again, those are the state and territorial 988 grant, the tribal 988 grants, and the crisis center follow-up grants. And we heard a lot about last week on the Jam from Dr. Ensel about the incredible importance of follow-up. And then just one other thing to bring to your attention, which is that we do have an upcoming webinar. This will be on February 10th. SAMHSA will be hosting a webinar called From Concern to Confidence, Strengthening 988 and 911 Coordination while Managing Risk and Liability. So it's a mouthful of a title, but really important because strengthening coordination is so important. And we know that there's been liability concerns, which we have tried to address with the liability toolkit that we released, about a month ago. So this is for states, counties, tribal nations, territories, 911 PSAPs, and behavioral health crisis services to introduce a new framework designed to help communities move forward with confidence. And so we will call your attention to that, and we'll look forward to your participation. So that's what I have. Back to you, Megan.
Thank you so much, Dr. McKeon. And as we are talking about the continuum of care of crisis services and the interoperability, I want to just note Dr. Balfour's comment in the chat where she says, I love ACT teams too. In fact, for forensic populations, AOT can also be an effective tool. But I worry when it is used as a way to get people into, quote, better services that they should be able to access without having to lose their rights. For example, I remember a patient whose AOT had expired telling me he wanted to get back on it because, quote, that's when the clinic answers the phone. That's very interesting, and noting that services just don't happen in a vacuum. So thank you for that comment, Dr. Balfour. And let's go to AHP on workforce. I'm going to give this over to Susan Lang at AHP.
Thanks, Megan. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here today. The last few segments, we've been talking about sort of quantitative and qualitative analysis around understanding the crisis workforce. Today, we're going to dig in around career pathways mapping. So if you think about particularly early career staff and how they navigate their way through mobility pathways, that's really what we're going to focus on today. So we want to start first by hearing from you. We have two quick poll questions. So the first one is, from the perspective as a leader or a supervisor, what most limits your ability to support early career crisis and behavioral health professionals in planning and advancing their careers through supervision? So we have a number of responses here. Choose as many as apply. We really want to hear from you about what you seem to be challenged by or what might be working. So limited time with supervision to focus on career development, few clearly defined advancement or specialization pathways within the organization, unclear expectations or criteria, early career staff are unsure how to articulate or plan their goals, and supervisors lack tools or shared frameworks for career mapping. So if you could go ahead and select, we really, really want to hear your voices on this. Really important to understand what you might be struggling with and working with your early career staff. And then the second question is, when you're thinking about career progression in crisis and behavioral health roles, which transferable skills do early career professionals most often need additional support to develop? And again, select as many as apply here. So professional communication across roles and systems. I think we've heard from folks a lot that those life skills, or folks often will refer to them as soft skills, sometimes can be missing. Leadership, initiative, and decision-making, confidence, time and workload, caseload management, interdisciplinary collaboration, so working with law enforcement, hospitals, emergency medical services, documentation quality, and then self-advocacy, folks being able to speak up on their own behalf. So please select as many as apply. All right. Karen, I don't know if we can see any of the responses. And if not, I'm going to turn it over to, there we go. Thank you so much. All right, so it looks like pretty even split. So few clearly defined advancement or specialization pathways, and supervisors lacking the tools or shared frameworks. This is really helpful for us to understand. Great. And then interdisciplinary collaboration got the top poll there. So thank you all for answering those questions. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague now, Mauri Martinez, who is going to speak to the work that he's been doing on mapping career pathways with the crisis workforce. Mauri?
Thank you, Susan. Hello, everyone. It is truly a pleasure to be here. My name is Mauricio Martinez. I also go by Mauri. That's like howdy with an M. I'm a senior program associate serving on the Workforce Innovation Lab at AHP. I support as a subject matter expert on behavioral health and workforce development initiatives with the goal of bolstering the behavioral health workforce. Today, we want to talk to you about why career mapping is an essential strategy, not only to bolster the behavioral health pipeline, but also as a recruitment and retention strategy supporting our crisis workforce. Career exploration can be daunting and complicated. That's why having easily accessible information for career explorers helps support interest in understanding new jobs or unfamiliar fields. For those who are interested in a particular field, career mapping provides direction and clarity. It can also increase interest if they can see the big picture and how it might fit into their long-term career or work plans. When requirements are clearly outlined, folks early in their career can set goals and actively work toward the next step in the career pathway. This alleviates uncertainty, promotes transparency, growth, and a culture of learning that supports talent development. Career pathways also support leadership in identifying staffing gaps and assessing skills needed for the organization as staff move up. Career mapping empowers people to find where they belong in the system and avoids losing them to other competitive fields. Next slide, please. The predictive analytics AHP developed for Oregon highlighted several factors affecting the behavioral health pipeline. We found that the later in their college experience that people choose the behavioral health field, the less likely they would stick to it. It's almost like following the wrong path discourages folks from staying in the field altogether. On the other hand, it highlighted that having a family member or family friend in the workforce as a child was associated with 12 times greater relative odds of entering the behavioral health workforce. So we found that early exposure to behavioral health career provides valuable insights into career options and fosters a more informed and skilled workforce. This can help spark interest in behavioral health careers by combining education with practical experiences. Which I do want to lift up is a strategy we've seen implemented in crisis centers in the nation by using teens to support other teens. One last thing I want to lift up about this predictive analytics is that the majority of existing behavioral health workers surveyed indicated that they pursued a behavioral health career due to the desire to follow their dreams. It's something that we've heard that proving that financial incentives are not generally the primary motivator, with many acknowledging they could earn significantly more in other sectors. Next slide, please. Mapping 988 was a bit more challenging than we anticipated. As crisis centers serve specific counties across the nation, differences in organization size, scope of services, and even clinical involvement make career pathways challenging to map. And since there is no universal credential for crisis services, we analyzed job postings for all call centers in the state. We pulled titles and assessed entry points. We found a lack of uniformity and consistency with different titles across all centers for hotline operators in the state. Additionally, another challenge presented with mapping 988 was identifying the entry point. It's something that we heard validated from a lot of crisis center administrators about how often volunteers are pulled into staff positions after gaining valuable experience. Thank you. This is the career pathways map we developed for Oregon. Our colleague Alan compared it to a subway map, which I think is a perfect way to look at it. Because like a subway map, it's important to know where you are and what your options are to reach your desired destination. And most importantly, knowing your options helps keep you in the subway system and not exiting the station to look for an Uber. I invite you all to check out the full map and see how we can work together to support our crisis services and crisis workforce looking to enter the field and stay in the field. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. And we appreciate your work to be looking at where we need to go and how to support workforce and really lay out a career path. It's so important. And to have that workforce feel supported in that career path. So thank you very, very much. I'm now going to turn it over to Kristen to take us home.
Thanks, Megan. Thanks again to AHP for both today's workforce segment and being the headliner sponsor of the Crisis Jam. As we can see, it continues to be a big driver of whether crisis systems actually work. What you're seeing on your screen is looking ahead at Crisis No. 4 coming this July in Washington, D.C. It's filling up quickly. We are excited to have Benchmark Human Services joining us as a gold sponsor, Solari as a bronze sponsor, Magellan hosting one of our lunches, along with critical debates, fireside chats, some of the most important conversations happening in crisis care right now. You don't want to miss it. Go to crisisjam.com and there's a link in the top if it seems like something that you'd be interested in attending. I'll be there. Next week, we're going to be diving into the role of technology in saving lives with Dr. Dan Reidenberg. This is such a timely conversation as technology continues to intersect with crisis systems, because we're going to be talking about what actually helps and what we need to be thoughtful about. And in 2 weeks, we're going to have Dr. Michael Compton and Dr. Amy Watson, who are going to walk us through how states have actually paid for crisis care, getting into those real mechanics behind these sustainable, robust systems. And just a quick heads up, a few weeks out, on March 18th, we're going to host debate number 11 with Megan Gleason and Dr. Ken Minkoff, tackling whether mobile crisis teams should respond in pairs when going into the community. Thanks so much for being part of our jam today. Thanks for watching. Tune in, log on, join the movement, and we will see you next week.